Okay, I think we're back in business. I just put the new points and condenser in, and starts right up. And it seems to run better. I mean, obviously, with what I discussed in the last segment, the problem with the intake valve on cylinder 2 needed to be resolved and is helping the engine run much better. Take a look inside here. I mean, everything's kind of willy-nilly. As I said at the end of the last part series, video, whatever you want to call it, I burned up some wires. I thought it was because I lost the ground on the transmission, which is how you ground the engine on the 914. It's at the back of the transmission. But when I started reading about condensers and actually watched a video of a guy testing these old style condensers, which of course is down here mounted to the side of the distributor, it turns out when they go bad, bad things happen. You definitely burn your points up. And I'm just wondering if, I know the points that I pulled out were completely fried, and if that didn't somehow force that current back down those wires or whatever. So anyway, right now I'm in good shape. Now, what I want to do at this point is get these wires all neatened up. I had a nice piece of conduit, that flexible conduit stuff running across the front of the engine there, and put them all in there, get all that tidied up, and start to take the old carbureted system off. What I also wanted to show you, I've got some more information on these new carbs and this elbow. So what that is, it's called a balance tube, and you go from intake to intake with this, it's like 1/2 inch heater hose is what it is. I got this capped off right now, and it supposedly helps idle. So it does exactly what I thought it would do. It shares the mixture from one intake to another. You get cross flow on your mixture. Some guys online say it's a crutch, that if your carburetors are properly balanced, you don't need that balance tube. Bottom line, I've got to set the carbs without it, because that's the first step, is get them dialed in without them interlinked. So I've got the elbow in here. I let P&B Performance know that I got shorted on this elbow, so I should get another one. Right now I just got a plastic cap in this one, so I can get them on and get them dialed in before I install the balance tube, which will probably be one of the last things. So that's where we're at on that. What I did want to do is shoot some video of the engine running in its current state. So with the fresh points, fresh condenser, and the intake valve fixed. So let me pause and we'll listen to that. Now the mufflers are not hooked up, so no muffler, just headers. But it fires right up, so that's it idle. It's a little bouncy. Let me rev it up some. It may be a little lumpy. I think it's a definite improvement from what we had before. So, new points, new condenser, and the intake valve repaired. So that's my reference. And now I can move forward and put on So, yeah, I got all the cables rerouted, neatened up. Now it's a matter of removing all this old stuff. So I'm going to take off the fuel line and the throttle cable, get that off, and then start taking loose on the manifold bolts, and everything should come off. So the intake runners came out pretty easy. It's just like rubber boots. And I guess the good thing about warming up the engine, I think it really helped the bolts come out of the intakes. Now, this Holly is mounted on like a standoff that goes through the engine case, and aside from the spring right there, that should be all that's holding it in the compartment here. So I'll get the spring off, pull that bolt and that bracket off, and everything should be clear. Alright, it's off. Boy, and there's some janky stuff going on there. Looks like that plenum under the carb, they had basically glued that bracket onto it. Sure appears that way. I mean, yeah, not an optimum setup, that's for sure. Looks like one of the bolts was coming loose. Yeah, glad to be getting rid of that mess. And yeah, this is the main offender, as those intake runners are just way too long. And yeah, you can see they were rusting inside from condensation. So, yep, be glad to get rid of all this mess. So with that done, top of the engine looks pretty good. I hit it with the vac again. I noted the gaskets are super thick for that setup, and the last time I did one of these carb kits, the engine tin can be really troublesome getting that manifold in there. I remember having to carve some of it out with a Dremel or something, but I don't like having a gasket on top of a gasket, so I'm going to pull that big rubber one and put the proper one down in there. It's also going to affect the length of the studs, because these manifolds are a lot thicker than what was on those runners. So yeah, I think that rubber's got to come out. So that turned out to be a spacer, and it's not rubber. It's more like a really hard composite, some kind of plastic, whatever. But now you can see the manifold will fit much nicer. Plenty of studs. So start over here on the driver's side and do a trial fitment and see how it looks. So last night, getting those manifolds in there was not a lot of fun at all. The problem was the two on the top, the sides, are easy. Here you got plenty of access. The two on the bottom that are like in between those runners, you can't see them when you've got the manifold in the car. And I tried it first time with the carburetor mounted to the manifold. There was no way. I mean, because the only way I could figure out, I tried using a magnet. I was using the magnet and inspection mirror a lot because, like I said, you cannot see underneath there. You've got to reach underneath there with a couple of fingers with a nut or a lock washer balanced on your finger and get it and slide it over the stud in between those two runners. It is really, really hard. So I struggled with that. First, I tried it on this side with the carburetor mounted, and then I just said, the hell with that. I took the carburetor off the manifold, which, is no big deal. It's two nuts, you got one over here and one there. So I don't know why the instructions say you need to mount the carburetor first. Probably because you're putting those threaded studs in the manifold and all that. So anyway, I was able to get one nut on one stud on those bottom two studs on each side. I think on the passenger side, I actually got the nut on the stud, but I could not tighten it down. I mean, you just can't get a socket in there. In fact, I was using a 13 millimeter half-inch long socket that I had basically took to the grinder and filed the sides down to make it thinner to fit in there. So now, all this being said, if the engine were out of the car, it'd probably be a hell of a lot easier. I think there's still going to be issues with getting a socket in there. But like I said, I've got 3 nuts on each manifold tight on those studs. And I'm going to call that good for now. Next time I drop the engine, I'll put the 4th one on there. And I'll shoot some video of the stud and everything just to show you how tight it is. So I got to keep moving on here. It's the following day in the afternoon. It's going to get really hot in here. It's already 90 plus degrees. So I want to get the linkage installed and the fuel line. Now, I did find out that the Type 4 bracket for the throttle cable is not part of this kit. So I ordered that from an outfit called AA Performance, which specializes in Volkswagen performance stuff. So hopefully I'll have that by Friday and I can finish off. But don't really need the throttle cable hooked up until I get the carburetors balanced, using the linkage and everything. So it's kind of low priority at the moment. So let me press on. Let me start in on this linkage, and hopefully I won't hit a bunch of stumbling blocks on that. All right, so I've got this kind of laid out. I've got the connecting bar in there. It has the adjustment nut on it, and it's a little tight. I don't know if the bar's too long. I even took the adjustment nut off this ball end. Now, I loosened up the carburetor, and I can get that in there, right? But no adjustment. Also, what's missing is there's that self-centering spring, but this is going to be so close. I don't know that you need a self-centering spring unless to get it off of those nylon bushings. Another thing I did, I flipped over the throttle arm because my throttle cable won't reach around far enough to pull it backwards from the back of the engine. Let me feed that cable up here. I mean, if I really force the bend into it, no, that's not going to work. That's too close. So I'm thinking the throttle pull needs to be at the front of the engine. You know, and I can slide that arm. It can be over here, it could be over here, it could be just about anywhere. So the bracket that I ordered is specifically made to mount in the same place the bracket on that original carburetor was. Any one of these, I think, probably the smaller, because this dimension here is smaller than these guys over here. It's probably supposed to be on this center engine casing bolt. So I don't think that's going to work, because again, throttle cable's not long enough to go all the way over, make that bend. No, it's just, I just don't think that's going to work. So anyway, two problems. You know that was going to happen. One being the length of the rod and the hardware I'm supposed to be using, and two being the length of the throttle cable. So let me continue to wrestle with this and see what kind of solution I can come up with. So what I ended up with, I left the adjusting nut on the ball end out. I did get the centering spring inside of the nylon cup, and there's, you can see there's just a tiny bit of clearance there. Also, I jammed the ball into that rod real good, because if you think about it, that has, without a locking nut, that has the potential to self-loosen. But I mean, I locked it in there pretty good. Then on this side, I've got everything as they want. So the spring is in the nylon bushing. You have the ball end and the adjusting nut. The point being is, if you can see that dimension there, if I had that other adjusting nut on the other end, there would be no room for adjustment. It'd be just jammed up. In fact, I don't even know that the carburetors would fit on there. So, I mean, feels pretty, you know, fluid. It's got a little resistance from the nylon, but I think you want a little of that. So I'm gonna run with that. Also, I went underneath on the firewall and rerouted the throttle cable. And I'm pretty sure now I can make this bend, right? If that bracket goes right there, this cable will bend around to that bracket. It's hard to do with one hand. So I put this arm, the throttle actuating arm, in the proper orientation, or what I believe to be. So basically the throttle is going to pull it backwards. It's going to force these arms down, the carburetor arms, and then your carburetor linkage to open it. Let me get a shot here. You want the carburetor linkage to go down. So that's my next process, is to install the linkage that connects these arms to the carburetor, just for fitment. After I get a good fit, before I fire this thing up, that'll come loose, because we want the carburetors, we want to balance them without the linkage, for just for idle. Okay, so I started off on the driver's side and went to the end of the actuating arm, right, with the linkage, and then came down to the throttle butterfly, and I used the shorter of the two standoffs. And you know, it's still the rod, adjustment rod, is loose right now, but it does all the travel, right? Pretty smooth. Opens the throttle fully. So that was my first goal. As long as it doesn't hit anything, and also doesn't hold the throttle off idle as well. You know, the only thing that a little bit troublesome about it is the angle on the rod, adjustment rod, but I think as long as the other side is similar, it'll be okay. And the reason I use the shorter of the two standoffs is because the more I looked at the other side, the more it appeared to be, the butterfly appeared to be further away from the actuating arm. So I'll go over there, we'll fit that, and see how it feels. So, yeah, I got the passenger side linkage on. It appears to be basically the same angle. So I think what's going on is the different size standoffs on the butterflies compensate for the fact that the two carburetors are offset from one another because the manifolds are offset from one another. And that all has to do with your camshaft and push rod tubes and all that stuff. So anyway, that's what I'm running with. So the action, you know, with the hind joints loose is not bad. It's like I said, it's opening the throttle all the way and coming mostly to a close. I got a little bit, but I think that'll be corrected whenever I do the idle settings. So I'm going to leave that for now. Maybe just tighten up on the Allen keys where those arms are pretty much directly over the top of the hind joints or adjusting rods, whatever you want to call them. So I'll tighten those down. Still don't know how this throttle bracket's going to land, so I'll leave that one loose, and I'll start in on fuel line next. Alright, I just brought the fuel line, the existing fuel line, took the old filter out, put the new filter in, came down here, put a nice brass T. One side goes back to passenger carb, and then the other goes to driver's side carb. I'm going to energize the pump, make sure I don't have any leaks, and then after that I'll reestablish the leads on the spark plugs and see if this thing starts. So, without doing any adjustment to the carburetors, it fires right up. And I mean, it's idling high. The linkage is just loose. It's supposed to be off the first time you start it, but you know, I think it's going to require minimal adjustment to get it down to a better idle. I need to check the flow I've got one of these flow meters, so I can make sure at idle one carb's not pulling more than the other. That and yeah, I'm surprised, and it sounds 100% better. I mean, it's got obviously a lot more performance than that stupid single barrel carburetor. So I'm gonna fiddle with it this evening and try to get it a little bit more dialed in. Tomorrow it's gonna be all about putting the muffler back on and cables. I got to get the CV axles back on. I mean, I'd like to road test it tomorrow, which is a possibility. And I booked a SCCA autocross for Sunday, which I think, as long as I get that bracket, and that's what will hold me up as far as a road test, is getting the bracket on. which I ordered that yesterday. I saw it shipped today from California. So, you know, road test may be a little bit more than a few days off, but hopefully I'd like to use the SCCA Autocross as like a testing tune, because I got bigger plans with this car. I want to take it to the Solo National Championships. I'm not going to win a championship, but they're letting the older cars run. It's the 50th anniversary, and I want to be there. In a 1975 Porsche 914, hell yeah, that's the year I graduated. That's so awesome. So very happy about the results so far. It was not super easy, but I showed you guys the problems you're going to encounter, and there'll probably be a couple more, and I'll let you know about them. As far as these carburetors are concerned, this ain't the end of the story of this, for sure. There's plenty more to do on this 914, so keep watching, guys. Thanks.